Good evening. I am Sharon Lemons. I'm a dietitian, and I was going to share with you a little bit today about coping skills in diabetes. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Basically, the objectives of this little session is to help you kind of find some strategies to work through whatever problems might be having, some strategies to reduce stress, and some strategies for self-care, and we'll go through those. So when you have diabetes, it can be very challenging, and there's a lot to maintain and a lot to balance. Your diet, your medications, exercise, just, all kinds of different things. Maybe you have equipment, an insulin pump or a glucometer or some of those kinds of things. And there's a lot to balance. So the first thing is you need to have some realistic expectations. You're not going to change your way of life overnight. You're going to not be able to lose, half your body weight, or maybe get your diabetes numbers perfect, all this overnight. Right? So you need to have some realistic expectations about how you go forward and how you can adjust to that. So, I always encourage, just set some goals, make those expectations to be realistic. Maybe your A1C is something really high when they first discover it, like 13, when what we wanted is at 7. Your goal may be to bring it down to 9 in the next 6 months instead of all the way to 7. And, it needs to be realistic. What can you accomplish? Okay. And those goals can be adjusted later. So if you start off with an A1C of 13 and you do get your A1C down to 9 in 3 months, well, in 6 months, it might be realistic then to bring it down to 7. So those can always be adjusted. And so just keep that in mind. The information you get when you are diagnosed with diabetes is overwhelming. We tell you all about how carbohydrates affect your blood sugars, and keeping your diet balanced, and here's your medication, and by the way, you have to take your blood sugar, and we want you to check your feet, and there's just an overwhelming amount of information. So just take things one at a time and sit down and say, okay, I need to start checking my blood sugars maybe at the beginning, and how am I going to go about making that work for me? Maybe I work out of my car. How am I going to make that blood sugar check something that I can actually do? And you take that one thing at a time. You can go to some classes, like this is one, but also if you have Medicare, or there is some diabetes classes that are available to you when you're first diagnosed. Those same classes may be available to you much more long-term if you have commercial insurance. You may have classes that are available through a local hospital. There's all kinds of ways that you may be able to access some classes. Maybe one of the challenges you have is the cost of diabetes. Diabetes, as many other conditions, can be extremely expensive. Insurance these days does not necessarily pay very well on some of these medications. There is help. if you have commercial insurance, there is always a copay card for any of the name brand and medications. There's also programs, patient assistance programs, or PAP, for many of those medications. And you just have to look and see if you qualify. And people will tell me, oh, I make too much money, I'm not going to qualify for that. Well, patient assistance programs for the cost of these medications are very liberal. I have had people I have worked with that made close to $90,000 that still qualified. So this is not necessarily a game breaker if you are making a decent living. You can look at that and see if that's something you can do. Your doctor may very well know about those patient assistance programs. If they do not, then you can Google it yourself and just Google patient assistance program and whatever medication it is that you're taking. The pharmacists also frequently are very good about helping with those patient assistance programs. So let's look at the steps involved in solving the problems with diabetes that you have. So the first thing is identifying your problem. So say that your problem with diabetes today is that you are having trouble fixing the meals that somebody has asked you to fix for yourself. And with that, you know, maybe the way to identify the problem with that is, you know, say, okay, here's my problem. I'm having trouble identifying, I'm having trouble fixing meals, and I need some alternative solutions. Well, you can come up with some of your own alternative solutions, or you can work with others and think of some solutions. Maybe you need Meals on Wheels. Maybe you need somebody to come in and help you bake up some meals in advance. You know, okay. Think about what are the consequences if you don't do this. Well, maybe if you don't do this, your blood sugar is going to be high, or maybe it's going to be too low. Maybe you're not going to be able to get enough food to keep you going if you don't have those things going on. So just a moment, okay, so if the consequence of your not having the ability to fix your meals is, you know, either high blood sugar, low blood sugar, or maybe you just don't have enough to eat, you know, to get through your day, then you know your consequences, and you could think about some solutions. Maybe you're eligible for Meals on Wheels. Maybe your insurance has the ability to provide you meals. Some of them do. Some of them have the ability to provide meals by a company called Mom's Meals. So, I mean, that's a possibility. Or maybe the solution is, you know, that you just have a friend come over and help you out, or maybe your neighbor brings you food. So, I mean, there's all kinds of solutions. And once you come up with a solution and you work through the solution, then it's always a good idea to go back and evaluate, how well is that working for me? Okay, maybe I have this friend making me food, but does she really understand my diabetes diet? And, you know, do we need to tweak that a little bit? Can your friend adjust what she's fixing for you? Or is there maybe another solution you need to look at to preserve your friendship, because you don't want to upset your friend, and that kind of thing. So it's always a good idea to evaluate and see how well that's going, And it may be going great, and sometimes it needs a little tweaking. So that needs to be available to you to evaluate that. Okay. So as you're setting these goals and you're looking at your problems, we always want to make sure that your goals are realistic. So say you have the same problem. You're having trouble with meals, and you need some help with that. So if your goal was to buy food from a restaurant every day, well, that may not be a realistic goal because of the cost. So um, you can look at that and say, okay, that's not realistic. What can I do? How can I use um, the food that I buy or that's provided through a food pantry or whatever, or maybe your church provides you food. Some churches have been known to do that. So what will make this goal realistic? What's some reasonable steps to get there? Do you maybe need a combination uh, friends bringing you meals once a week to help you get through this? Do you maybe need somebody to come over and talk to you while you're cooking meals? So that can be something. So also let's look at something like your blood sugars. Maybe your goal for your blood sugar is to get your blood sugar down to 100 before meals. And maybe your blood sugar is already up at 300. Well, is that reasonable? Do we need to adjust that, maybe make it 200 for a week and see where we're at, and how are we getting there? Well, as you're doing this and you're trying to achieve these goals, it's always a good idea to get those written down. In today's world, written down can be you picked up your pen and your piece of paper and you wrote it down. Or it can be you kept a note file in your smartphone that kept up with it, or maybe you have an app. So one way is not better than the other, but there are many possibilities to get to that goal and to write those down in one way or the other. Maybe you have the voice app and you're recording it. So that's a possibility. So another thing that can really help with these goals, if you're accountable to somebody who's supportive. Now, in my present job, I provide that service for the people who come to me through MHMR. But I mean, only clients of MHMR qualify for that from me. But maybe the person you're accountable to may be a friend or a relative. So somebody that's supportive, though. I never ever encourage anybody to try to be accountable to somebody who's going to get onto them and chew them out. And you really want somebody who's going to be supportive in your goals and maybe help you find a way to more realistically achieve your goals. Okay. And through that process of being accountable and looking at your notes that you've written down and your reasonable steps, then you can create these strategies to help you achieve your goals. So maybe, if we're talking about that blood sugar, did you limit the carbohydrates that you were eating with meals, or maybe you eating too much pasta with meals or something? Is that something that you can have a strategy for to cut back on the carbohydrates, like a pasta or rice or something like that, to help you achieve those goals? Okay. So everything is one step at a time. Rome wasn't built in a day. We've all heard that, right? But neither was reaching your diabetes goals. So you take it one step at a time, and most of the time, I would start with working on your blood sugars, because many times when you start with working on your blood sugars, some of those other things are going to come in line. If you're having problems with your feet, well, that might get better with improved blood sugars. If you're having trouble with being depressed, that might get better with having improved blood sugars. So, but make sure that whenever you set your goals, that you don't sit down and write down like 10 goals and try to accomplish them all at once, because that's overwhelming. So you pick the one that's most important. And like I said, many times I start with blood sugars, but it could be other things as well. If somebody is doing a fairly well, and the main thing they need to do is eat homemade meals, so they're not eating so many carbohydrates. Maybe they're trying to avoid French fries whenever they go out to eat, so the solution is to eat more homemade meals. Well, you can come up with some important things to help with that. And that might be the most important thing you're working on. But always figure out what's most important to you to work on, and start there. Okay. And the way we achieve goals, whether we realize it or not, is we create habits for ourselves. Well, these habits is just a matter of learning to go through a process and set it up as a habit. And we all have habits. Our lives are all a series of habits. So maybe the challenge that you're having is you don't remember to take your medicine. So if you give yourself a specific time to take your medicine, then you can create a habit around that. And for example, the habit may be that you have a alarm set on your smartphone that goes off at a specific time, and you say, oh, it's time for me to take my medicine and eat something. Okay. Taking diabetes medicine should always be followed with eating something. You should not take diabetes medicine and then not eat. So you can set those reminders. You can keep supplies in a specific place. If, for example, you don't have any kids around, maybe you might want to leave your diabetes medicines at your plate, at the table, that kind of thing. I do urge caution if you have kids, pets, whatever that might get into it. But, that's just an example. You could also put your diabetes medicines, maybe you put your diabetes medicine next to what you typically drink. Maybe you drink a bottle of water with dinner, and so you put your diabetes medicine next to the bottles of water or something. So, that could be a trigger to help you establish this routine. If your goal, for example, was to do more exercise, believe it or not, one of the best strategies for getting yourself to do more exercise is to come in and change into your workout clothes. Put on, your shorts, your t-shirt, your tennis shoes, that kind of thing. So if you establish a habit of when you come in for work, you go and change into workout clothes, that makes you more likely to go and work out and get exercise. So, all of these can be individual. They don't necessarily have to be the things that I suggest, but just getting yourself in a routine can be very helpful with this. Okay. Another thing that can help you with diabetes diabetes tends to have some mental health components. We tend to get a little bummed out, a little sad about having diabetes, and that's normal. You know, uh, your something has happened in your life, and your blood sugars are now an issue, and now you're going to have to eat food within these guidelines. You're going to have to take this medicine. So, being a little depressed, a little sad, um, uh, those kinds of things can be helped by just being productive. It can help your mood. So, how can you be productive? Ask yourself that question. How can you be productive? So, for many, this may be a doing a craft. It may be something with your job. It could be gardening. So, there's many ways to achieve that. Um, Another thing you can do is share your journey with others. Now, some people, it's electronic age, some people get on the internet and they blog and they write out these things. And it's very helpful to some people to go and read other people's blogs. Or it may just be talking to a friend. So it can be all of those things. And like I said, maybe it's continuing with your career and being productive at work and that kind of thing. Or you could volunteer. Volunteering is a great thing. There's a lot of statistics that actually shows that our life gets longer with every group we volunteer in. So that's a possibility. Maybe what you need is to be productive at home. Do you have a routine at home that helps you make your home where it's more pleasant to be in? Do you have a cleaning routine? And I'm not saying you have to have a spotless home, but do you have a routine of things that you do? Is it cooking? Is it cleaning? Is it going and getting on the internet and doing something with your friends? That there's all kinds of possibilities. And another thing that could help is actually leading. And what I wrote is lead in a project, but it just could be some sort of leadership. Are you involved in your religious organization? Is there something you can do within your religious organization that is kind of a leadership role? And I mean, it doesn't have to be a big leadership role. I mean, leadership can be all kinds of small things, so that's a possibility as well. But we tend to feel better about ourselves when we're able to do some productive things in our life. Okay. So another strategy that's really important with diabetes is getting all the information you need. Okay. So you need to maybe look up reliable websites. You can also just get information about where your numbers for diabetes should be from your doctor, and that no website ever replaces your doctor. Any information we give, including what I give on these presentations, should always be a secondary to what your doctor has for you, because they know about you personally. I may know about diabetes in general, but I don't know you personally. So it's really important to listen to your doctor. This A1C of 7 that you hear me talk about, this may not be an appropriate goal for everyone. If you maybe are elderly, then this is a legitimate reason that we change this particular goal. If somebody is elderly and they have a tendency to fall, then we're going to try to make sure their blood sugars stay just a little bit higher, because if your blood sugars go low, you may very well fall and hurt yourself. So these goals should be set in collaboration with your doctor. Your doctor should have a good idea of where you should be. If if your doctor was talking to you about blood pressure, he may have a different blood pressure goal for you if you have some other condition that I, as someone sitting here not knowing you at all, would never know about. So it's always important to get that information from your doctor. But there are some websites that give you some general information about where we generally put those goals. And one of those is the American Diabetes Association. And so there are others, but that is one. I encourage people to make a record of their diabetes journey. And the word record, that's not necessarily that you're sitting down and writing everything out. I've already said you can take your smartphone, you can talk into your smartphone and let it record what you have to say. You can open up an app and you can type it in. The other thing you can do is just take pictures. When somebody comes to me and I ask them to write down what they've had for 2 or 3 days, I encourage them to take pictures of that food, because the one question nobody ever remembers is whenever I say, what did you eat yesterday for dinner? Most people can't remember what they had yesterday for dinner. So I encourage people to just take a picture. It gets to be a real pain sometimes to actually write this stuff down. If you're not geared towards writing stuff down, it's very difficult to do it. So I encourage people to take pictures. If in your diabetes journey you're worried about sores on your feet, then take a picture and show that to your doctor when you walk in. And once you show him the picture, he's probably going to ask you to take your shoes off and look at it. But you've got that picture where you can show it to him and get his attention, her attention. And so that's an important way that you can do that is using pictures. Like I said, writing it down. I do encourage you to advocate for yourself whenever you go to your medical professional, your doctor, your physician's assistant, whoever you're working with, your dietitian. If they ask you to do something that's not realistic, you need to speak up and say, that's not working for me. Maybe you are taking a medication that's causing your stomach to hurt. Well, your doctor needs to know that. So make sure you speak up and tell your doctor those things. If you're having an issue with anything any of your medical professionals recommend for you, by all means, speak up and say, this is a problem. If you're having, like I said, a problem with your foot, make sure you speak up and say, this is a problem, but here's my picture. Okay. Another thing you can do is basically just take care of yourself. Exercise. Exercise, whenever we talk about exercise and I say, I'd like to see you doing 150 minutes worth of exercise a week, the picture that pops into everybody's head is, I'm going to have to get on a treadmill for 30 minutes 5 times a week. Well, that's not necessarily true. 150 minutes a week really is 30 minutes a day for 5 days. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be all at once. It can be 10 minutes outside playing with your dog. It can be 10 minutes playing with your child. It can be 10 minutes just taking a walk around your house. It can be all kinds of things. I do encourage you to, if you are having trouble doing exercises, maybe your balance isn't real good, and look up on the internet. If you Google chair exercises, you may very well find some exercises that work for you, especially if you type in YouTube chair exercises. There are some very good ones. I also like a particular lady. She puts out a YouTube channel, and it's Body Groove, and it's dancing. But she tells you all the way through it, there's no wrong way to do this. And there's people of different sizes and different abilities. Some people are sitting in a chair. Some people are like these ladies holding onto a chair. Uh, some people are just dancing, and it's a good thing. So anyway, that's something that you can do, is look for some of those easier exercises. And like I said, break it up. It doesn't necessarily have to be 30 minutes on a treadmill. It can definitely be a 10 minutes 3 times a day, doing some sort of exercise, maybe it's just fun exercise, like playing with your dog. So also, I wrote the word de-stress, and I think stress is really under-recognized as a cause for higher blood sugars. If you're having a lot of stress in your life, then it's really important to address that stress and find some ways to work through that, whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's reading a book, whatever it is, that can be very important. Routines, and I'll say routines / habits. Here again, we go into those habits and routines where if you are doing the same kind of routine and every day, it makes it easier to remember to do all of those things you're supposed to do. So being in a routine is a good thing. Having spiritual connections, whether you're connected with a local church, or you read your religious document of whatever kind it is, the Bible or whatever, then I think that's incredibly important in helping with removing that stress, is to work on that as well for some people. Okay, know your goals and know your plan. This is really important, because if you are saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, and I hear this all day long, then that's not helping you. Know your goals, have them written down, and if you get to the end of an appointment with your healthcare provider, or the person helping you with exercise, your physical trainer, the guy at the gym, whoever's helping you with exercise or something, and you don't know what your goal is, then ask them, what is my goal? So that you can write it down, make a record of it, and that makes it easier to work for if you actually have it written down. Eat well. Many people think that whenever we talk about nutrition and diet, we're thinking of ways to cut food out and you to eat less and less and less food. That's not necessarily true. We need you to eat well because your body needs that fuel in order to work. Your car doesn't go anywhere if you don't put gas in it. Your body doesn't go anywhere if you don't put food in it. So it's important to eat, that balanced meals of proteins, carbohydrates, vegetables, that kind of thing, in order to keep your body going. So, and gratitude. One of the things that I discovered many years ago is if you keep like a gratitude journal where maybe you write down 3 things you're grateful for in one day, it really is very helpful to write down those things. Even if you don't write them down, even if you just make a habit of finding things that you're grateful for each day, I think it does have a tendency to give you a more optimistic view of life. Okay. Being organized. We already talked about take things one step at a time. What is your goals? You know, how are you going to keep your diabetes care organized? Okay. Are you going to do meal planning? Well, meal planning doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to sit down and write down a plan for everything you're going to cook. Sometimes meal planning is, okay, today I'm ordering from this restaurant and this is what I'm going to order. You know, medication consistency. Do you have a plan for making sure you take this medication every day at the right time? Are you taking time to take care of yourself? You know, and whatever reason that you need to take care of yourself. Well, we all need to take care of ourselves, but I mean, many times we have different things we need to do. Maybe you have a problem with your foot and you need to take care of that. Maybe you just need some meditation time. So, I mean, you know, but include those things in. Acknowledge that you are not going to be perfect. This is really, really hard for some people. You will not be perfect because none of us are perfect. So acknowledge that you're not necessarily going to be perfect. Forgive yourself, move on, go back to your goals, and just go back to work on them. Okay, so relaxation. Relaxation is really important. It helps keep your blood pressure down. It actually also helps keep your blood sugar down. If you are really intense and upset, that is a trigger for your blood sugar going up. So think about ways that you can relax. Are you going to meditate? Are you going to do yoga, garden, arts, crafts, singing, dancing, writing, praying, whatever it is? Find a way to relax. You know, go pet your dog, that kind of thing. So frustrations get in our way. So sometimes we need to rephrase those frustrations and be able to say, hey, gee, you know, I can see where this is a problem for me, but now I'm going to take this approach. So basically just kind of rephrase those frustrations and say, okay, this is what the problem is, but here's my plan to work on that frustration. That can very much help. And I already said this once, keep a gratefulness log. We've already talked about the keeping records. I just wanted to point out here that the keeping records actually does help with that frustration component, especially when you're going to your medical professional and they need to try to help you. If you can tell me my blood sugar at breakfast, lunch, dinner, bedtime was this, and I took this much medicine, you know what? I'm much more able to help you figure out maybe where we need to adjust things than if you walk in and say, oh, well, my blood sugars have been running in the 150s. It's easier for us to sit down and look at those records. And like I said, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be written. Take a picture, you know, that kind of thing. And you know, also it's important to accept that there are things you cannot change. You know, there are certain medical conditions that we're not going to be able to reverse. So if that's true, then, you know, although that's a difficult pill to swallow, so to speak, there will be things that we cannot change. And we do need to acknowledge that. Okay. So how can others help you? Well, my suggestion for when a family or friend wants to help you, tell them specific things to help you. You know, if what you need in order to take care of your diabetes is for somebody to call you on the 3rd of the month and say, hey, I know it's time for you to go pick up your diabetes medicines. Can I drive you there? Then tell your friend that. Tell your family member that. You know, if what you need is for somebody to run interference, and when somebody in your social group starts giving you a hard time about what you're eating, and let's face it, if you have diabetes, you know what I'm talking about, people do this, then maybe the thing your friend can do is to help divert that person's attention so that you can concentrate on what you need to eat and how you need to take care of yourself without somebody making you feel guilty. So ask people for those kinds of specific things. You know, it really bothers me when this happens. How can you help me with that? You know, I'm really having trouble keeping up with this aspect of my diabetes. You know, can you come look at my foot once a week? You know, that kind of thing. So another thing your friends can do is maybe you're having trouble in these social situations. And like I said, if you have diabetes, you know what I'm talking about. There's always someone who wants to put in their 2 cents worth. So maybe your friend can sit down, or your family member can sit down and help you role play and figure out how you're going to handle it. And if you've practiced it through role play or just talking through it or whatever, then it makes it easier to actually do when you get in those situations. And if you know your friend or your family member is going to be there to support you through this, then it also helps an awful lot. Okay. So another thing that's important to do to help with your diabetes is just to have fun. Right now in the world of COVID, maybe we're not all able to go take vacations. We're not able to go for picnics with family, that kind of stuff. So I wrote out some suggestions of some things that I thought might be fun, but not necessarily get you exposed to somebody who has COVID. So the first thing is you need to ask yourself, what is fun to you? So if what's fun to you is reading a book, then that's important. If what's fun to you is going on a walk, then that's important. So it's important to do what's fun for you. But some suggestions I had was do some fun things that involve movement, like the dancing. You know, think about what's fun when you're alone, like the reading the book, doing crafts, that kind of stuff. Do you like looking up recipes and trying new foods? One of the things I found interesting was a digital scavenger hunt. So maybe you have a group of friends and you say, okay, here's the list of things that you need to find, and you all go with your cell phones and you take pictures and you start texting it to each other, and the one to find all the items on the scavenger hunt first wins, that kind of stuff. There's also right now an awful lot of online tours because we've had children who could not go to classrooms. There's tours of things like zoos and national parks and that kind of stuff. So maybe that's a possibility. Or puzzles, crafts, gardening, those kinds of things. So another important thing to include in your life is humor. Maybe you like funny movies, jokes. You know, do you like doing silly things? Humor actually improves your immune system, believe it or not. It helps relieve pain, improves your mood, and you know, I have found it useful to have a humor buddy. This is a terrible thing to admit, but me and one of my friends send each other inappropriate memes, inappropriate humor that we probably would not share with anybody else in the world, but we have a laugh and we move on, and we didn't insult anybody because, you know, we both found it humorous. So, okay. Your healthcare team. Your healthcare team is so, so important with coping with diabetes. Um, with them, you need to be free to share your feelings. You need to be able to tell them what your challenges are. If you're having a challenge with your diet, they need to know that. If you're having a challenge with your medication and it's causing you to have a side effect, they need to know that too. Like we talked about earlier on the financial issues, some of these medications, the copay is just ridiculous. So if you are having a financial issue and you can't afford your medications, your medical team needs to know that. They're perfectly aware. I've worked with enough doctors that whenever we start talking about what the copays are for somebody's medication, whenever I would go investigate it, the doctors are like, well, we're not using that drug, because it was just too expensive. But there, like I said, there are some possibilities for getting assistance for that. So it's important to be able to talk through that and help find you some solutions. So it's also important to talk to your healthcare team about your physical health, but also your mental health. Having diabetes is just not easy. And if you're suffering from some depression, anxiety, those kinds of things, then you really should share that with your healthcare team. Okay. So maybe you're a caretaker of somebody with diabetes, and this is a whole nother ball of wax, basically. If you're a caretaker of somebody with diabetes, it's also important for you to take care of yourself. One of the first things I learned whenever I took a CPR class is do not put yourself in danger, because if you put yourself in danger, you can't help the next person who needs CPR. Well, it's the same way with taking care of somebody. If you put your health in danger because you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to continue taking care of that person. So you should make sure you're getting some exercise, some rest. You should make sure you're taking care of your diet. Maybe you're a person who's taking care of somebody with diabetes who doesn't have diabetes, but you should also take care of what your dietary needs are. Give yourself permission to have these feelings. It's really important to not suppress your feelings to the point to where it causes some mental health issues. Some of the stuff that help people is sometimes it's simple stuff. Pick up a pillow and just punch the devil out of it. Go throw a ball into a fence or something. So you need to know that you have these feelings, and it's important for you to be able to express those feelings, even if it's expressing it to an inanimate object like a pillow or a ball or something. Okay. And if you need professional help, then you should seek that. If taking care of this person is beginning to wear on your health, then it's important for you to be able to say, this is a problem. I'm no longer able to do this without it affecting my health, and therefore I need some help. So basically, know your limits, seek help whenever you need to, and have the support from friends and relatives whenever possible. And like I was talking about in one of the earlier slides, it's important not necessarily just to have the support of those friends and relatives, but it's also important to tell those friends and relatives precisely what you need. If you're the caretaker of somebody and what you need is once a week for somebody to come over and spend 30 minutes with this person so you can go down and have a cup of coffee all by yourself, you know what? Ask for that. It's important for you to do those kinds of things. Okay. So you're not going to get away without me talking about your meal plan. So basically, if if you have diabetes, we didn't go over this real thoroughly earlier, but I do encourage you to make sure that you eat some non-carbohydrate vegetables, preferably enough to fill half your plate, and some protein, and your starch should, your protein should be about a fourth of your plate. Your starch should be about a fourth of your plate. On this plate it says bread, but it could be rice, potatoes, those kinds of things. You can have some milk, some fruit, some non-calorie drinks or low-calorie drinks, that kind of thing. So that can be really important. So at this point, I'm going to ask for questions, but I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and then I'm going to unmute. So hold on just a moment.